Hello and welcome to all the viewers around the world who are joining us for the Norwich broadcast of World Speech Day 2022. I'm Metin Yilmaz.
And I'm Natalia Sosa. This year we've got some fascinating speakers from all over the world who are going to be delivering speeches on themes of harmony and unexpected voices.
Coming up, we have speeches on an array of topics from racial disharmony in America to menstruation and anxiety during public speaking.
Have you ever felt anxious?
I'm a bit anxious at the moment, but I'll try to keep it under wraps throughout the show today. Let's now go live to our live reporter Bronwyn Brown, who's in the UEA newsroom.
Hello, so I am here live in the Broadcasting House newsroom, ready to speak to all the different speakers, all about the topics of their speeches and how they found the whole process, how they found the process of public speaking. We've been here all day and have been preparing for this coverage all week with a big production team behind us. So I'm now joined by one of our social media editors, William Evans, who's been working really hard today, haven't you, Will? Getting all of the content onto the website and onto our Twitter. Just talk me through the day. How's it been for you?
Well, it came in about 9:15. We had our pre-production meeting. Been sort of sending people out to go and do vox pops out at Norwich Market, see what the public's thoughts on speeches are. Been doing lots of posts, taking loads of photos around, and just sort of getting the word out that we're putting a good broadcast together.
And has everyone been working really hard? Has it been lots of running around today, or has it been more of a calm atmosphere? How would you describe the atmosphere?
It's been a bit of both. Like at times it's been a bit frenetic, but most of the time, things have felt under control.
Oh, lovely. Well, I'm going to let you get back to work, and I'm going to hand back over to Natalia and Metin in the studio.
World Speech Day is a global event giving people from all over the planet a chance to make their voice heard. To give you a taster of what World Speech Day is all about, let's have a look at some of the cities who took part in last year's event.
We have curated 8 speeches of a widely different variety from speakers currently based in Norwich. Our first speech is all about racial disharmony in America.
But before we hear the speech, we sent our reporters Will and Rachel out to interview journalists Robert Moore and media academic Michael Fraser on the causes of growing social tensions in the USA.
For people around the world, the Capitol riots last year show just how serious division in the United States really is. In response to the presidential election results, thousands of defiant Trump supporters stormed Congress to occupy, loot, and vandalize. But where does this type of division actually stem from? ITV's Robert Moore was the only reporter to follow the protesters inside the Capitol that day. When we spoke to him, he felt that the American media played a key role in sowing division.
Television news is not a news gathering activity here for the American cable networks. It's purely discussion based. It is purely view based. They put together these huge panels in a studio, and their idea of, almost from dawn until dusk, their idea of news coverage is to debate things. And often they will debate things from a singular point of view.
Our reporter William Evans also spoke to UEA professor Michael Fraser, who said that difference and division were fundamental parts of the American identity.
So, Michael, what do you believe are the root causes of disharmony in the US?
Even before the arrival of Europeans and enslaved Africans, It was a place of incredible cultural diversity among the indigenous people who were often in conflict with one another. It's, climactically, everything from, the swamps of Florida to the deserts of Arizona and the Canadian-like conditions of Maine. And culturally, it's drawn people from every corner of the earth, descendants of people who came both willingly and unwillingly, and of newly arrived immigrants from everywhere. And when you have that sort of incredible level of diversity, of course, the ideal is to bring people together in some sort of shared project. But ultimately, the most you can sometimes hope for is a kind of agreeing to disagree. That's what federalism is all about, right?
We're now approaching 60 years since Dr. Martin Luther King's famous I Have a Dream speech. How far away do you think America is from achieving that harmonious dream?
King phrased it as, I have a dream that someday people will be judged based on not on the color of their skin, but on the content of their character. And the very idea that race matters goes against Dr. King's principle. King's whole point is that that's not what we do.
It's the end goal.
It's the end goal. The idea that that has already been achieved and we're already there, and anyone who's still complaining about racial inequality is violating the spirit and the principles of Dr. King, has become a talking point.
The spirit that Martin Luther King invoked in his I Have a Dream speech is one that many Americans have yet to harness. Though some seek to misuse his voice, King claimed that it's only through words that Americans have any hope of healing their wounds and achieving harmony with others. And today, many Americans still place great hope in King's words.
I have a dream today.
Thanks to our team there for that fascinating package. It's now time for our first World Speech Day contribution from Grace Mulamba.
In Washington, D.C., 1963, Martin Luther King gave his legendary I Have a Dream speech. He exposed the ugly reality of racial injustice in America towards African Americans and spoke his dream of seeing a divided America standing united. This inspiring message not only echoed across the nation, but reverberated across time. 35 years later, in the same historic city, I was born. Today, we still come back to his message to admire how far we've come and for guidance on how to continue the fight for equality for all Americans. As a child of Congolese immigrant parents, I grew up surrounded by African and Black American culture. I grew up on fufu, fumbwa, and makayabu, but I also knew the DC, Maryland, Virginian slang like it was my second language. I later moved to Maryland, where I met kids from all over: Cameroon, Ethiopia, Mexico, Vietnam. I didn't have to leave my city to see the world. In fact, the only people I remember not seeing in the city were the white folk. On the rare occasions I did, I'd always wonder with innocent curiosity, why are they here? Where do they come from? They were sort of a spectacle for me, because the people I encountered at local shops and church halls were often people of color. I was so out of touch with who white people were. The little of what I did know was what I saw in American sitcoms like The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody from Disney Channel. The differences in our qualities of life were blatantly obvious and continue to haunt me for years. How my life seemed always full of hardship and uncertainty when Zack and Cody were always seemingly luxurious adventures and always so carefree. I began to ask why my life was so different from theirs, why my setup was so unfair. It made me angry. Eventually I understood America is more segregated than we let on, and it is this physical separation that enables interpersonal hostility and distrust among us. When we think of King's speech, we think about the call to action to stand against injustice and are inspired to fight against racism for civil rights until justice is won. But as a nation, we've missed an essential ingredient of King's dream. Right now, there is a palpable tension in America that is undeniable. We know it comes back from our dark history of slavery and segregation. But despite all the marches and movements, we're still at civil war with each other. Black folks and white folks slander each other in our small special circles while we polish our language when we are in public view. And our hearts remain the same, cold and unloving. Democrats and Republicans constantly take jabs at each other at every opportunity, consistently humiliating each other. Men and women don't really care for or trust each other anymore. They've been hurt by each other so much, they only care about what's right for themselves, at the expense of one another. Instead of King's beautiful harmony, we hear only the discord of bickering and hostility. We insist on our own ways, demanding everyone around us accept what we believe because we are so strongly convinced our way is right. But this insistence brings only division and counterfeit peace, not lasting positive change. We build these walls of towering hate and lock ourselves in these echo chambers that play back to us exactly what we want to hear. Most times, we don't even talk to each other. We talk at each other, around each other, behind each other, but never turn face to face. We are foreigners to each other, yet we live in the same land. I know we are tired and hardened by the calamities that surround us. COVID, George Floyd, climate change. We all want change. But if we keep making the same mistake of thinking our peace will finally come by force, we're only fooling ourselves. Hate begets hate. Wars create more wars, and violence breeds only more violence. But didn't King say we wouldn't be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters, and righteousness like a mighty stream? And yet we're still judging men and women by their physical appearance, rather than the contents of their character. We forsake dignity and discipline, while allowing distrust to flourish. We consistently hinder the waters of justice and righteousness with our unwillingness to lay down our defensive arms. And you know what happens when we hold those waters back? Death and destruction. You get desolate dry lands like the unthinkable massacres of the 1994 Rwandan genocide, where senseless killings ripped a nation to shreds. At the end of their bloody disaster, nobody won. A Tutsi woman whose family was murdered in the genocide was traumatized, having to hide and escape for her life, particularly from a man who made it his duty to get her. After murdering many others, this man was thrown into prison while she suffered from grief and severe post-traumatic stress, fearing that he would one day return for her. After seeking counseling and support through a local peace club, where she was beginning to heal from her trauma, she met that same man, who was then released from jail in need of help himself. This woman had every right to hate this man from the core of her being. In fact, she almost quit. But get this, he asked for her forgiveness, and she gave it to him. Now when they meet, they embrace each other. They work towards rebuilding what they've lost, together with other survivors and perpetrators from the Kasebo district, by building a savings and loan scheme and contributing to a common fund for emergencies. Together, they work on healing their trauma and creating lasting change. That is the power of forgiveness. That is harmony. And if the Rwandans can overcome such bitter divisions, surely we can too. I know America is capable of the same, because during the Black Lives Matter protest, there was unity in the likes of which I have never seen. Blacks, whites, Latinos, Asians, side by side, marching for one cause. That is why I know we can do it. America, let's break the cycle of hostility before we destroy each other. Real power brings life, not destruction. Real power builds, not destroys. Real power brings unity, not division. It transforms an enemy into a friend, because we can't fight the struggle alone, because our destinies are intertwined. Love creates unity. Forgiveness brings reconciliation, and both create true harmony and bring real change. That is true power. I know it's not that simple. We relive pain and grief every time we see hatred and injustice cause destruction to the people we love, to people who look like us. Accountability is crucial. But if we are ever to heal our country, King tells us, darkness cannot drive out darkness, nor can hate drive out hate. It's only through love. In all honesty, I'm still trying to learn this too, but this is the message I know America needs to take home. Love is patient. Love is kind. It isn't rude. It doesn't think about itself. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Let's sing that with harmony. Thank you.
What a great start to show. Grace is talking to Brown in the newsroom now.
Clearly, that is a really, really powerful speech, Grace. That was incredible. And it's from your own lived experience as well. So I just really want to know, like, why you think it's so important to talk on that topic right now.
Well, just because in America there's a lot of racial division, a lot of hostility that everyone can feel it in the atmosphere, and it only keeps getting worse within each passing year because people are so divisive. They don't like each other, they don't love each other. So I just wanted to see a more united America, one where people come together, they're able to look past their faults and things, but just come together in love, basically.
And you spoke so strongly and emotional, I think lots of people would agree. What changes do you want to see in society as a result of your words? What do you want people to do as a result of your speech?
I want people to lay down their arms of defense, really, and not to always see everyone as an enemy. We can't reach the goal of civil rights if we're always against each other. We have to stand united so that we can reach our goal together. That was the main point of my speech.
And finally, just how did you find the whole process of World Speech Day? Have you ever done anything like this before?
No, I've never done anything like this. It was kind of stressful, but I'm so happy I did it because I'm doing something that I'm passionate about, which is speaking my truth. So,
thank you very much, Grace.
Thank you so much.
There we go. I'll hand back over to Natalia and Metin in the studio.
Now, we're joined by Professor of Political and Social Theory, Alan Finlayson. Welcome to the show, Alan.
Thanks, Metin.
Thinking back to Martin Luther King's famous I Have a Dream speech, what are the parallels, if you will, between speeches from the 60s, from the Civil Rights Movement, compared to speeches on racial disharmony today?
That's a really good question, and perhaps a good way to think about it is maybe not so much in terms of parallels, but as continuities. King's speech kind of sets a high watermark, both for rhetoric, for a powerful, moving speech, and for key phrases that we remember, like I have a dream, but also for the challenge it sets America in the future to achieve that dream and move beyond the divisions that he was talking about. I think Grace's speech is a really interesting reflection on that. It both draws on King's speech, but also she makes it her own. And in a way, her giving the speech invites us to think, well, is she the fulfillment of King's dream? And in part, she is. She's a free person saying her piece about politics and speaking to her country and being judged by the content of her character and her words, rather than by anything else. But as she also reminds us, that dream is not yet completely fulfilled and has somewhere to go. And so she invokes the spirit of King and King's sense of love and charity as something to call America back to itself. And that's repeating and drawing on phrases of the past is a way which rhetoric can work, calling us back to ourselves so that we rethink where we are and where we're going.
Perfect, thank you, Alan. As we all know, there is major disharmony on Europe's eastern front as Ukraine is being invaded by its neighbour, Russia.
In the face of a modern humanitarian crisis, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has used his voice to unite the free world with Ukraine in condemning Vladimir Putin's invasion and to issue a powerful call for an end to the war.
We spoke to Ukrainian and former UEA journalism student Yevgenia Subotina about her experiences during the war in Ukraine. Yevgenia is currently in the city of Dnipro, which has recently come under attack.
Ми на своїй землі. Ми нічого і нікого не боїмось. Ми нічого і нікому не винні.
President Zelensky has been quite prominent in making speeches to the Ukrainian people. So how important have those speeches been for your morale?
People here listening to every president's speech, and it's quite important for them. It's quite powerful because they get inspiration and support from the president from his speeches. and it's one of the, I would say, one of the reason why young boys who didn't have any experience in military events are going to defend their territory and do what they can to protect Ukraine. So he is quite quite inspiring person in this situation, and it's like a support from his words. Many people are listening and keeping an eye on almost every government instruction.
There's been like a lot of false information being spread on mainstream and new media. So to you, how important is the role of a journalist in giving a fair representation of what's happening in Ukraine right now?
Before sharing any info, they have to check it maybe 3 times or even more with trustworthy and official sources, such as government websites, not just some Telegram or WhatsApp channels. Today, some even journalists from Ukraine saying that it is information war, it is hybrid war, and almost everyone, I would say, in Ukraine, almost everyone who has social media is in the role of the journalist. So role of the journalist and maybe the role of every citizen from Ukraine is very important right now, to sharing only checked and trusted sources of information.
Now, we've just touched on wartime speech making, Alan. What are some of the recurring techniques that you might have noticed in wartime speech making in particular?
Well, it depends which side of war you're looking at. On the one hand, as we can see with the example of President Zelensky in Ukraine, a speech maker can achieve a kind of unity for people, can be the point of focus for all of them, so they feel their kind of experience is being shared between themselves, and that can make them feel stronger and provide the resolution to survive through wartime, and that's part of what Zelensky's done clearly very effectively. Yeah. But of course the opposite is also true, that wartime rhetoric can often be about division, can be about promoting hostility between different groups, and at its worst, dehumanising people so that soldiers or others involved feel okay to kill each other. So that's a really good example of the ways in which rhetoric has this kind of double edge. It can be something that brings people together, helps them see what they have in common and be organised to face challenges, but it can also be used to push people apart and encourage them to do things that they really shouldn't be doing.
Great insight, thank you, Alan. The Russian media have depicted the invasion on Ukraine as a necessary one for their national security. Both sides are making full use of communication technology to argue their case. That brings into question just how it's shaping our thinking and raises questions about the influence of fake news.
Our next speech, entitled Metal Talks, addresses this very topic and is presented by Lola Hopkins.
I would like to invite you to share an experience with me. An experience that I believe will encourage you to reflect on the fact that as mere humans, that we, as human beings, are vulnerable to becoming immersed within a silicon seclusion. We are seduced by scrolling, by metallic mind traps that cut us off from our personal perspectives. And so often you find yourself craving the sunshine, you forget to smell the rain. Longing for summertime, you believe that winter is pain, but you are responsible. But then there's metal and technology. The borders of your world only extend as far as you dare to run. The ocean's depth is only as deep as you dare to breathe. The constellations only illuminate as bright as you dare to smile. But then there's metal and technology. Your perspective is a powerful, powerful resource that you are armed with from the second you enter this world. Your perspective manifests emotion through the triumphs and trials you are faced with and the clouds that hinder your view. But now, in a world of metal and technology, this resource has become scarce. It's like being bought. Your own perspective, your own perception is solely and truly yours. You are in harmony with it. That is when they snatch it from you. They rob you of perhaps the one thing that allows you autonomy over the life that they do not live. They extract pure originality from your mind and wring it out until all that is left are the tatters of something that once was individual, unique, and yours. But then there's metal and technology. I used to love the wind as a child. It was embracing, a force that represented the presence of nature. I would walk whilst the wind tore through the leaves of trees and brushed against my face, my hair flailing, as if I had been electrified. I would think how happy I am to be alive, and not only to be alive, but to live. But then there's metal and technology. The other day as I walked home, engulfed by the wind, I complained and I complained. And the next day I complained and I complained. You see, in a world of metal and technology, somewhere along my travels I had lost my own perspective, had allowed the influence of others to morph how I perceived the wind. But when I paused just for a moment to consider what I was thinking and why, I remembered how the wind had once been a source of comfort to me. I had regained some of my resource. Even in a world of metal and technology, perspective is not something to be manufactured or made of metal. It is a gift to be in harmony with, to aid you in a pursuit of true emotion, unfiltered and raw. Do not let them rip that away from you. You are capable of thought, of passion, of harmony with your soul. This cannot be bought, for it is too valuable. It is not only a resource, but a treasure to guard, as the media, the entrepreneurs, the powerful try to reach through the screen until there is nothing left on the other side. One cannot be at harmony with something that no longer exists. So you are responsible. Even in a world of metal and technology, it is imperative that one remains in touch with insight. I did not lose my love for the wind. It was always there, but I did lose sight of it amongst the metal thoughts.
So, Lola, that was an extremely poetic speech, bringing in the impact of technology on our relationship with the rest of the world.
Thank you.
How big of a problem do you think this is amongst all age groups within society?
I think it's a really big problem, and it's a shame because it could be so useful. I think technology really hinders individualism, purely because of, oversaturation and exposure to the repeated concepts and social constructs that you're exposed to. And, I think it really hinders people's ability to think for themselves, to form their own opinions, and to really utilise their own perspectives.
And it's quite an unusual topic, really, for a speech. What inspired it for you? What made you write and perform a speech on this?
Well, most significantly, I'd have to say my jump from my home sixth form life to university. So now coming to the end of my first year at university, I've met so many new people from different backgrounds that have had, their own personal life experiences that have, shaped them as who they are. And I've learnt from them, I've listened to them, I've conversed with them, and I've learnt so much about the world and about other people. And it's really made me reflect on myself and think about the way I perceive the world around me.
Oh, amazing. And just finally, you said just then you're, the end of your first year. How have you found this whole process? Because it's a really brave thing to do if you're as a first year at university.
I've really loved it because I love to write and I love poetry. Unfortunately, I don't study it for my degree, so I don't get to be immersed within it as much as I'd like to. But this experience has really allowed me to utilise my own mind, my own thoughts, my perspective, and to bring that forward and allow people to listen to it and have feedback, which has been lovely.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Lola. Back to Metin and Natalia in the studio.
The threat of fake news is particularly worrying for us as journalists. This next report highlights some of the dangers it presents to society at large.
A typical social media user spends on average about 2 hours a day using social media.
Collectively, the world spends more than 10 billion hours using social platforms every day, but not all news is accurate and factual.
February 24, 2022, Putin launched an invasion of Ukraine. which unleashed an onslaught of disinformation on the internet, from deepfakes to viral videos from the West Bank. But why is there so much fake information?
The problem with the fog of war is that the forces want to control the message. We've seen that in what the Russians are doing in order to say that this is not really a war, but this is a special operation. That's fake in itself. And in that sense, what the Russians are trying to do is to control the narrative, control the stories that are coming out. And they are keeping the real messages and what's happening and not admitting what they're doing so that they have the country behind them. So it's about controlling the message. That's why we're seeing fake news. That's why we're seeing untruths coming out.
Fake news is a parasite of social networks. Nevertheless, it is a professional duty to check the facts and prevent misinformation.
Truth and accuracy in journalism is the cornerstone of what we do. Nothing is more important, because if you do not tell the truth, if you are not accurate, you are creating fake news and you are being disloyal to your reader, to your listener, to your viewer, simply because they know that they should never trust you ever again. Not only do you let yourself down, you also let your colleagues down as well.
With fake news comes a tendency for some to deny the ever-growing climate crisis, which is affecting the world at the moment. Alan, how important is it to strive for truth in matters that affect us all as a collective, especially in speeches?
Well, it's absolutely fundamental. Political rhetoric, I would say, is ultimately about people making decisions on policy and on things that they're going to do in order to make things different in the future. And you can't make a good decision if you make that good decision based on wrong facts. So in the end, if rhetoric is relying too much on fake news, on made-up statistics, or playing to people's fears rather than trying to think clearly, it's going to cause people to pursue courses of action that ultimately are self-defeating.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. The next speech is being read by Esmatullah Kiber, who comes from Afghanistan and is a chevening scholar. He uses his personal experiences to emphasize the importance of taking the climate crisis seriously.
Hi everyone, my name is Ismat and I grew up in Afghanistan. Currently, I am studying for my Masters in Climate Change and International Development at University of East Anglia under the most prestigious Chevening Scholarship in the UK. I am a climate activist who wants to expand understanding of the climate crisis, and I ultimately seek global climate justice. People do ask me what climate justice actually means. Well, I don't find it easy to answer because I think it's much broader and more complex than we initially think. But if I had to summarize it, I would say that there is climate justice when a citizen does not have to leave his home due to flooding. There is climate justice when someone must not leave his village due to drought and water scarcity. And there is climate justice when a child need not work for a single piece of bread and can instead go to school. Science has proven that human-induced climate change threatens humanity and our Earth systems. Global warming is happening, and it's not just bad, it's much more catastrophic than we assume. And yet, why are our politicians not acting on this reality? If the climate emergency escalates, we know it will be the vulnerable communities at the forefront of feeling the most adverse impact of climate change. If the current system does not change and the priority of leaders doesn't shift and address this, then the vulnerability of money in developing countries will rise significantly. The system is not fair. Only the lucky few are getting opportunities for better living standards. The system must change, not the climate. Social justice is an national process to reach climate justice. Lots of injustice and inequalities are currently ongoing in my homeland, Afghanistan. I hereby would like to share a personal encounter from my own life. In 2018, on a Friday evening, I met a 10-year-old child called Nurgul, who was polishing shoes on the street in return for just a piece of bread. In our conversation, he mentioned that he was displaced from his city due to drought in his province. They left their home due to water scarcity. They had lost their livestock due to lack of water. They could not irrigate their land because of yet another and yet a longer dry season. Well, do you know what was the most emotional part of our conversation? It was when he said that he wished he could read. He wished he could go to school to learn to better his life. Now that he was relocated to Kabul as a local immigrant, at the age of 7, he could not go to school. He must work to feed his family, to help his paralyzed father affected by the civil war. He works only to survive, and his future prospects are unlikely to change. But there are thousands like Nurgul. There are thousands leaving their homes due to flooding, natural hazards, and extreme poverty. Despite all these injustices, Afghanistan receives less and less attention regarding climate finance and adaptation to enhance community resilience toward climate risk. We can no longer ignore the climate crisis. We are all responsible for the welfare of current and future generations. The crisis must be stopped by cutting emissions in industrialized countries and providing climate adaptation to the most vulnerable communities. In the end, I would say that we, the youth, are not only victims of climate change, but that we have the potential to be a valuable contributor to climate action. We can be the agent of change. We can be the entrepreneurs. We can be the innovators to come up with solutions. That's why I am so grateful and proud to work hard during my time here as a Chevening scholar. We can and we must stand together for the better future, accelerating climate action through education, science and technology. And we must not stop raising our voices towards climate injustice globally until we get to decisive action needed from our global leaders. We will always speak up on behalf of our youth and nations and adhere to our global human rights principles. Thank you.
So we have had some extremely inspirational speeches today already, and all with very powerful messages. And the one you just saw there is no exception. So Esma, what have you got to say to people who are inspired by your speech and want to take action against climate change?
Well, thank you. The climate emergency is one of the greatest issues of our time, and I think despite being a victim of climate change and the impacts, we can be the valuable contributor to climate actions. For example, we the youth, we can raise our voices towards seeking for our rights, for seeking for our global justice. We can change our daily behaviors. I believe that every individual behavior matters. Every small changes can bring bigger impacts on our community. So I believe that every small actions matters. We can bring changes in our daily life. We can reduce our carbon footprint. We can reduce our energy consumptions. We can raise our voice against all these social and climate injustices.
Oh, thank you, Esma. And now that you're studying and working in the UK, along with lots of academics, on the climate crisis, what can the UK do as a whole to help in the world battle against climate change?
UK play a primary and leading role in strengthening international climate environmental agreements. So UK can brings the priority to cutting down the emissions by its own, and also can stand with other nations to provide and consider all the climate justice. But I believe to achieve the climate justice, we need to pass and consider the social justice about communities and help all those countries with the least developed opportunities.
Lovely, thank you very much. Now I'll hand back over so we can watch some more of the speeches we're going to see today on World Speech Day 2022.
Alan, what do you think about adding personal experience in public speaking?
Oh, it's a really important way to speak to people and to try and make clear what you're saying and to persuade them of your case. We were talking earlier about how it's important to be truthful in your speech, but a speech has to do more than just communicate the truth. It has to try and make that truth something that's very vivid for the people who are listening, so that at the end of the speech they don't just know what it was you were saying, but as it were can visualise it and maybe even experience it. So someone talking about something they experience is one way to do that. It also helps us get to know who they are and think about why we want to listen to them and why they've got some information that might be important. And so we can connect with them and see them as people that we share something in common with. But also, a speech is about trying to connect maybe some very big and general claims, like about climate and climate change, to our particular experiences. So it's also a way in which we can see how the general argument that is being made about climate change is in our personal lives as well. So I think it's a really important way in which a speech doesn't just communicate the truth to people, but establishes connections between speakers and audiences and between speakers and the big issues that they're talking about and thinking about.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Alan. We sent our environmental correspondents out to talk to climate activist and speech maker Rune Keir about his experiences and the problems we face.
Geeta Matney, a resident of India's Mosni Island, is just looking at an empty landscape where she once built her home. She is one of the hundreds of local residents who face the destruction of climate crisis. Climate issues are real, and the change is happening right now.
A lot of people are still using climate change, although it sounds neutral. You don't know if the change is good or bad. A change in climate sounds like, a trip down south, maybe a little holiday. That sounds pretty good. So people are non-responsive to that term. And that's really significant in terms of how we speak about it, that there has been a tendency to speak about climate in a way that simply doesn't fit with how we see it. We're using we're using the opponent's words and framing instead of actually framing it ourselves. Al Gore started that work some years ago with defining the climate crisis, and Greta Thunberg, the EU, the UN, started using climate emergency, which again is a stronger term. We have Extinction Rebellion now, so that's even stronger. But still, we really need to make sure that we call it by its right name, or we will not be able to get the reaction that is really needed. There has been an intense discussion, public discussion about climate for many years now. And most people know about it, most people care about it, and even in almost all demographics across the world today, 70 to 80% of the people say climate change is happening, we caused it, it's bad, and we need to act on it. That's pretty much established. The problem is that's attitude and opinion. We lack action. The politicians are still not acting on this and the corporations neither, because they feel that the opportune moment is not there. Maybe people will lose votes, they will lose money, essentially, if they act. So we need to move these people from having the right attitudes and opinions to actually taking action and speaking out on the issue. And that's where World Speech Day is really essential, and the capacity for public speaking is absolutely central to people having the skills to speak up about the issue and voice their opinion on climate change in a way that's infectious and engaging to other people. And that's how we change the debate, and that's how we break the emissions curve, by speaking up.
Our next piece explores the stigmatization of periods and how it can harmfully affect people who menstruate. Alan, how might speeches differ in dealing with taboo subjects in particular?
That's a really interesting question, and quite a difficult challenge actually for some speech-making moments.
Yep.
When you're making a speech, a persuasive speech, you want to win people over to your side. You want to have their sympathy, right? Mm-hmm. So you want to kind of be on side with them in some way to get their sort of views to kind of align with yours. Now, if you're talking about something that you know your audience is going to be uncomfortable with or unhappy about you talking, then the risk is that you're going to lose them immediately, and they're going to be annoyed or upset with what you're saying. So you have to make a judgment about how far you can move towards the audience and its expectations and feelings before you lose your argument. Sure. But the opposite might be what you decide to do as a result of that. Some of the things that matter to people, like reproductive health, for instance, might be subjects that society is keeping quiet and not wanting to address. And your whole political cause rests on you bringing these things to the forefront of people's minds. So sometimes it can be important to go the other way and almost kind of seek to shock people, to push them out of their settled assumptions, to bring forward things that people don't want to talk about. And some of the big and significant changes in society have come about because people brought to the light things that weren't being talked about. We don't want to talk about abuse or violence at home. These might be difficult. These are difficult, uncomfortable subjects to hear about. But if we don't hear about them and make them public, then we can't think about the ways in which we can deal with them. Sure. So speakers have to push the boat out sometimes and take the risk of shocking their audiences into action.
Do you think that because of those things that you mentioned, because they're so uncomfortable, that oftentimes taboo subjects can make for the most well-known and, you know, speeches that come off well?
Yes, absolutely. I think when people are really bringing something to light, not in a way that just appalls or upsets or offends audiences, but brings forward in a way, as we were saying earlier, that communicates a truth and connects with an audience, that can be extremely powerful. Some of the most powerful speeches in the House of Commons, for instance, in the British Parliament, have been those where members have departed a little bit from the protocol of Parliament and talked about their personal experiences and said, look, actually, you know, when we're discussing a bill, for example, about gay equality, have said, look, actually, here's my experience as a gay member of Parliament, or here's my experience as a woman who experienced domestic abuse at home, and that can really bring to the minds of the members of the House the importance of the issue that they're addressing. Yeah. So connecting it with the issue that you're trying to propose, not just a shock, but not necessarily being restricted by worrying about what people's sensibilities might be.
Great, thank you, Alan.
Thank you, Alan. Before we hear the speech, we sent our reporter Laura Barnes to investigate the societal attitudes surrounding periods. This is what people had to say.
Half the world's population experience periods of menstruation, and yet it seems to be a topic of taboo for many people. We spoke to Dr. Fee Roxburgh, a lecturer in philosophy at the University of East Anglia, about how and why stigmas are created.
So what do you think created the stigma around periods?
So I think that stigma comes about because it's a tool of oppression, it's a tool of the sort of power forces that enable and perpetuate marginalisation, and it works because with stigma, those who are in the mainstream, who do have power, have a way of ensuring that people who have less power keep their experiences minimised.
We also spoke to 3 young women to see how the stigma around periods has affected their lives. So what has your experience been with period stigma?
Well, I felt like my whole life, well, since I got my period, it wasn't easily recognised, like my symptoms and everything, and then being recently diagnosed with PMDD meant that whilst I was growing up and I had more severe symptoms than the usual person, and I'd never heard of the disorder before I got diagnosed, whenever my period would come around, I didn't really understand why I had stronger symptoms that I did, and not really having any access to resources.
I definitely have experienced it throughout my life. I still think it's a huge thing. Even when I talk to people about doing stuff bloody good, like it still feels kind of like there's stigma there.
I was quite young when I started my period, and it was always really awkward because my mum and dad are like divorced. So when I went to my dad's house, I'd be like, oh, like I don't have anything. He didn't even have bins with like lids on. So yeah, you just feel really, really awkward. So yeah, growing up there was a lot of stigma around it.
And how dangerous do you think this stigma can be?
I always felt like one of the most common symptoms of PMDD is like mood swings and crying spells and things like that. And I always almost felt like I had to be careful around people who I was with.
I think it can be really dangerous because obviously period poverty is a huge issue, and a huge part of that is the lack of education and the taboos around it, because it means that then people can't actually get access to period products, and people who menstruate that don't look typically like feminine, because obviously we're told that it's only girls that do, they kind of feel excluded from the conversation, they don't have access to the right products, and people go undiagnosed with things such as like endometriosis because there's just not enough education or awareness really about period related health issues.
I think it's really bad. I think as well when I started I really panicked and just thought like something was wrong with me, but I think as well when it comes to like the use of like tampons or whatever, not having like a chat about it, like you might not realise that if you leave it in for too long it can be dangerous and harmful if you're not educated on it.
Our next speech is by Amber Monet-Sisson. Amber is a menstrual cycle coach from New Zealand whose speech focuses on the stigma surrounding menstruation and period poverty.
Today I'm here to talk to you about periods, the menstrual cycle. I'm going to tell you how the menstrual cycle is key to gender equality. Now, I'm sure this topic has made some of you feel uncomfortable, but some of you might feel inquisitive, and I challenge you to hear what I have to say. This is not an anatomy lesson. I simply want to draw your attention to a critical aspect of menstruation that has persisted for centuries: stigma. How many of you have had to slip a sanitary pad up your sleeve so no one will see? Or felt that surge of anger at the fact that there is a tampon tax? Or how many of you have been in a position where you cannot afford sanitary items? These are all realities of life as a menstruator, and this needs to change. Hi, my name is Amber Monet-Sisson. I'm a menstrual cycle coach and educator. You're probably wondering, what is a menstrual cycle coach? Well, put simply, I educate people on the menstrual cycle and help them to find harmony with their cycle. I'm also an expert on period poverty, having dedicated years of work and research to this cause. Period poverty refers to the lack of access to essential sanitary products, as well as access to adequate basic sanitation services. And fundamentally, it also includes lack of access to menstrual education. This biological process has existed since the dawn of time. It is a fact of life. And believe it or not, there was a time where humanity celebrated menstrual periods. The ancients believed it to be a highly magical and spiritual phenomenon. The menstrual cycle is more than just a monthly bleed. It's also how ovulation occurs. It's how we reproduce. It is our body's vital sign of fertility and health. The menstrual cycle has 4 unique phases, where in each phase we have different abilities, strengths, weaknesses, and moods. And being aware of this, we can create a sense of harmony within ourselves and the world around us. However, over time, cultural and social shifts in our world have taught us to hide menstruation. We take pills to control it, use sanitary items to avoid seeing the blood, and we pretend our menstrual cycle doesn't exist. This stigma has irrevocably led to dire consequences for some of our most vulnerable populations. Globally, we have acknowledged that our world needs change. The Sustainable Development Goals were created to address our global challenges. I want to bring to your attention SDG 5, Gender Equality. And I want to ask you, do you believe we can achieve true gender equality when half the population is subject to a stigma that prevents them from living harmoniously in our world? 26% of the global population menstruates. In fact, a person menstruates for 10 years of their lifetime. That's over 500 periods. Yet across the world, stigma disempowers people and creates unequal life outcomes. 1 in 10 people who menstruate in the UK are unable to afford sanitary items. In the global south, lack of toilet facilities leads women and girls to develop coping strategies to manage menstruation, such as eating and drinking less. Menstruators are often excluded from religious, cultural and social events. Some cannot even leave the house when they are bleeding, preventing them from attending work and school, leading to unequal economic outcomes. Studies have found women in the global south have been coerced into irreversible sterilisation surgeries because they are not empowered with reproductive education. You may be thinking, there are more pressing issues in the world, like violent conflict, food shortages, or a global pandemic. However, all of these issues exacerbate period poverty and hinder life for menstruators. Imagine being in a violent conflict and having your period and having no way to manage it. What would you do? I envision body harmony as the freedom to embrace and celebrate the menstrual cycle and live without stigma, just as the ancients used to. I believe that this can be done through menstrual cycle education, and this is the beginning of your education. Together we can end menstrual stigma. To realistically achieve SDG 5, gender equality, I believe 3 things to be true. That education matters, empowerment matters, menstruation matters, so make menstruation matter. Thank you very much.
Bron is joined by Amber in the newsroom now.
So another extremely powerful speech there. So I'm joined by Amber now, who just made that speech all about periods and period poverty. So Amber, lots of people would think that period poverty is something that only affects developing countries. But what about here in the UK? How does it affect people here and in the more developed countries?
So period poverty affects all areas all across the world, mainly because of the stigma attached, and 1 in 10 women in the UK can't afford sanitary items, which prevents them from going to school and work. It's the same in the US, similar statistics, same in Australia. Actually, I worked doing a lot of period poverty work in Australia, so saw a lot, and yeah, we worked primarily with homeless women, so it was really interesting to see that, and it was the first sort of eye-opening experience that I had with period poverty.
So it was mentioned before we saw your speech about your job, which is really interesting. I've never heard anything like that before. You're a menstrual cycle coach. So just tell us a bit about that. What does that entail?
So yes, I'm a menstrual cycle coach. So what I have done is I've studied and learned as much as I can about the menstrual cycle, and I try and then give that information out to other people. So effectively, I can help people to have better periods, to get information about their periods, to help sort of move through issues that they might have with periods, PMS, things like that. But effectively, what I want to do is just bring this education to everyone.
And is that sort of what inspired your speech initially? Was that the role you've already had made you want to talk on this here?
Yes. Also, I'm doing my MA in Gender Analysis and International Development, where I talk about everything menstruation there as well. And that's where it's, a lot of my work is really just noticing how much the stigma has affected every element of period poverty, period education, menstrual hygiene management, and things like that. So the more I can communicate that to the world, the easier I think it will be for us to start recognizing that menstruation is normal and it's a normal biological process, and we don't have to have that stigma.
Yeah, and obviously this is not a one-gendered issue. It's a female, male, everyone's issue. What can men do to help educate themselves and help with the period, everyone knowing about periods and the menstrual cycle?
I think get curious, don't be afraid is one thing that I can say, because, everyone, so many people in this world have a menstrual cycle, not everyone, but we have, there is a lot of menstrual cycles going on in the world. People have daughters, people have, wives, sisters, all of that, and so people can just start by getting the education. There's so many resources online. It's a topic that's getting more and more traction. So, people really can just get involved with the education, but I think don't be afraid.
And just something that has been mentioned earlier on in the programme is the conflict going on in Ukraine at the moment. There's lots of refugees there fleeing, lots of whom will be having their periods. How is being on your period in that situation going to affect someone?
I think it can, obviously there's a few factors. So being in high stress situations can actually stop your menstrual cycle or cause menstrual cycle irregularities. So that's sort of one element, but obviously the most critical element is lack of access to sanitary items and lack of access to water, sanitation, and places where you can dispose of your sanitary items as well. And these are things that are often overlooked or maybe not counted when interventions are in place. So, you know, people are trying to like help with the situation, but we forget about menstruation. And, you know, also the fact that there'll be young girls that may enter menstruation in that time as well and get their first period, and it could be in a conflict, you know, so there's so much awareness needs to be had around the situation.
Thank you so much for educating us all on this topic. Finally, we were kind of laughing because you're watching yourself over there on the screen saying you like your Auntie Sue. How has the whole process been being part of World Speech Day 2022 here at UEA?
It's been really great. It's been really great. I've never done a public recorded speech before, so it's been a really nice experience just to work with you guys and to get the message out. So yeah, thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Amber. Back over to Metin and Natalia in the studio.
Another challenge is access to food or lack thereof, but this not only happens in third world countries.
In fact, it's much closer to home. Our next speaker is from Cambridge. George Colwell is speaking about food poverty.
I don't quite remember being born, but what I do know is that it was about midday on a wet and blustery Tuesday afternoon in Cambridge, against the backdrop of the world-famous colleges and their symbols of wealth and plenty. I was taken home, carefully and lovingly attended to day after day, fed, dressed, content with the state of my own existence. I knew nothing else. Days and weeks turned to months and years, nursery turned to school, school turned to college, and college turned to university. In my periphery, a background of warmth, affection and love had guided me every step of the way. Passing acquaintances turned to friends, and the two strangers that took me home on that Tuesday afternoon turned into an irreplaceable rock, a foundation built on love, and indeed a foundation providing me with my own haven and shrine to harmony. Another person was born on that same wet and blustery Tuesday afternoon in Cambridge, nearly 22 years ago. They too were taken home, but his story unfolded somewhat differently. The necessity for food is not one merely of a biological nature, not one merely for the purpose of survival. No, it is a necessity that it gives its recipient an unfathomably powerful fuel, a fuel that allows growth, both physical and emotional, a fuel that creates strength, a fuel that grants opportunity and sparks innovation. So it is then that a society built on the guarantee of food as an inalienable human right is one inevitably with a vital brick in the foundation of global harmony. Food wars needn't be, for we as a species are capable of feeding every single mouth on this plentiful and generous earth. But we choose not to. Should we accept millions to choose between a roof and a plate? We choose to keep shelves stocked and fridges empty. We choose to force the single mother to steal, the young couple to beg, and the elderly to shiver through the endless nights of winter. While 5 million people in the UK and 1 in 9 globally don't have enough access to safe and nutritious food, we permit the banker, the oligarch and the CEOs to bathe in gluttony and caviar. There can be no harmony while few have so much and so many have so little. Poverty has many faces. It appears to us in film and TV, on the streets, on the bus, at work, at school. It is the transparent blanket that covers society, keeping no one warm, hiding the true faces of millions of entrepreneurs, engineers, nurses, doctors, teachers, eager to provide for society, for you. People with dreams and aspirations, tethered down by the cloak of hunger and destitution. It is the cloak that covers that person born on that wet and blustery Tuesday afternoon. The cloak that eagerly awaited as your neighbours and friends lost their job. This isn't some distant issue confined to the third world. Food poverty can happen to anyone. From that person born amongst the affluence and apparent wealth of Cambridge, to the child born in the slums of Mumbai. Whether you like it or not, it's your problem too. When considering this stark, dark reality, Carl Sagan comes to mind, one of the great astronomers and thinkers of his time. Referring to the fragility of our planet in the vast cosmic dark, he said this: "We are the custodians of life's meaning. If we crave some cosmic purpose, then let us find ourselves a worthy goal. Only when we bravely embrace this hard reality that faces so many of us and look to actively fix it, can we unhinge the tethers of the blanket of hunger. Only when we kick out of power those who pursue personal gain over the people's interest can we see the necessary resource distribution to those who need it the most. Only then can we start to heal the scars plaguing society as a whole. Only then can we create some semblance of harmony. So, what action will you take to help eliminate food poverty?"
There was another very powerful speech all about food poverty and the effects to all sorts of different people. Now, I'm joined here by George, who just made that speech that you just saw. You asked us a question at the end of that speech there, George, about what we're doing to help with the problem. So just let us know, what are your best bits of advice to help with ending food poverty?
Well, first and foremost, I think things like food banks are a vital role in the community, not merely donating there or working there, because that effect is obvious, or giving food to people that need it most, but it really does build a fantastic community spirit. It raises awareness around the issue. But secondly, I think, to bring out my inner politics student a little bit here, kicking out the charlatans that are in government at the moment, they do not care about food poverty. They've had 10 years to sort it out. We've got to change.
So can you ever see a world where food poverty is no longer an issue, and what the difference is here in the UK and worldwide?
Well, in the UK, we have an awful lot of people in food poverty, and far more than people often think. But globally, as 1 in 9 people don't have access to safe, nutritious food, as I mentioned in my speech. A world without food poverty is possible. It's whether we have the appetite to do it. At the moment, it doesn't seem like the politicians that are currently in power around the world have too much interest in that. But it is definitely possible. And if we have the appetite as the next generation coming through, we can solve it. It's up to us.
And for us, everyone working here today, everyone that's worked on the show, and all the speech makers, we're all students. What, as students, can we do to aid in this issue? Are there places we can go? Can we donate? Can we volunteer?
Definitely. Volunteering, donations, all really, really useful tools. But I think first and foremost is raising awareness for the issue. If people are aware of it, it's far more likely that governments are going to be pressured into doing something about it. If we have a kind of world where food poverty is is one of the most foremost issues, then it will no longer be a problem.
So, George, just talk me through your inspiration for making this speech. The theme this year, as we know, is harmony. How did you get from harmony to a speech on food poverty?
Well, there's a couple of factors, really. The first one is I'm from Cambridge, which is the most inequitable city in the country in terms of the inequality and the divide between the richest and the poorest. And because I've lived there all my life, my mum has worked in this sector for 22 years. So she would come back day after day, and you kind of see it reflected on her face, amount of destitution and poverty that she's seeing day in, day out, it really takes a toll on you, and it has an effect on me. I want to kind of help solve that. And secondly, I'm currently working with Lord John Bird on his Wellbeing of the Future Generations bill. So I was kind of focusing on food poverty and the alleviation as a necessity for going forward to create a sustainable future. So those are my two main inspirations, but I think both equally important. On the one hand, giving the foundation to my passion for it, and on the other hand, actually creating legislation that can help change it.
And I don't know, well, just let me know, have you done any speech making before? Have you done lots of public speaking? Because we just saw you on the screen. It was really good, really confident. How did you find the whole process of being part of World Speech Day here at UEA?
It was absolutely brilliant, really good. I didn't need too much pushing into it, to be honest. I think it was something, as I say, because it's something I'm so passionate about and what to raise awareness for, it came kind of naturally. Even though I hadn't done much speech making before, I think it was something that was so important to me that I just had to, give a voice to it, give a platform to it. So yeah, it's been a wonderful opportunity, really good.
And are you going to take this forward? Can you see yourself doing speeches on food poverty or anything else in the future?
As long as it's a problem, there's work to be done, so definitely.
Lovely. Thank you very much, George. We'll hand back over to watch our last few speeches here at UEA.
A very powerful speech from George there, so thank you very much, George. Some of the best-known speech makers after the Second World War are on the left of the political spectrum. People like Tony Benn and Arthur Scargill spring to mind. Alan, do you think that speeches from the left seem to cut through to people more, or is there really no difference?
That's a really interesting question. I'm not quite sure how I would start by answering. I think that perhaps after the Second World War, there's a great deal of social change, of course. Lots of new kinds of struggles come onto the political stage.
Sure.
So not just governmental politicians and party leaders wanting to be elected. We get lots of speeches for, as we saw earlier, Martin Luther King. For racial equality, we have speeches demanding gender equality and the feminist movement and the environmental movement and so forth. So there's definitely a certain charge to a speech that is, if you like, pushing against the mainstream.
Yeah.
That is attacking the establishment and demanding big change. That's exciting. And that's clearly going to be attractive to a lot of people in the way that a speech that's about should we put a percentage on or off the interest rate isn't quite going to get people excited. So it's definitely an advantage in a way for, at least not necessarily from the point of view of ultimately winning, but from the point of view of winning an audience over to a speech that's coming from the outside, pushing in and galvanising people for that kind of action. A lot of those big speeches after the Second World War. But at the same time, there were lots of very powerful and successful political leaders coming from the conservative side of things. Sure. In America, Ronald Reagan was nicknamed the Great Communicator for his empathic and artful and very image-driven way of speaking. And Margaret Thatcher, though a divisive figure in the UK, was clearly had a very gifted bunch of speechwriters and was very good at giving speeches too and galvanising her side of the political spectrum. So I think a lot of it depends on what kind of issue you're talking about and the political context you're in, and whether that gives people a feel that they want to join with you and be on your side. And both Reagan and Thatcher had that opportunity. They were both saying, although they were establishment figures, running for office, they were saying, we're going to come in and turn the tide. We're going to change the direction of things and change the direction of the country.
Do you think that, you mentioned people on the left fighting against the mainstream there in a lot of speeches, dealing with harsher topics like food poverty or homelessness or unemployment, things like that. With the right wing tending to deal less with those topics or less passionately about those topics, arguably, do you think that maybe on the right side you might have to work harder as a speechwriter for a right wing politician?
And also it's actually a case of having to work harder because often, as I was just saying, sometimes political actors on the right side of the spectrum can bring in the same kind of drama. They can appeal to nationalist sentiments, for example, in certain ways, or to people's passions of all kinds. There's an opportunity, certainly opportunities for passions on the right-hand side of the spectrum. I think it's more when you're giving a speech that's very much about carrying on doing the same thing. That might be a left-wing or a right-wing leader, depending on the political context. That's going to be a harder political speech to make exciting. And when it comes to perhaps the more challenging in a different way issues, food poverty, climate change, these are challenging issues, but in a sense it's clear what the stakes are and what the argument is about. What if you're giving a speech which is equally kind of intractable, which might be a kind of complex economic issue about taxation or interest rates, but actually is really important? How do you communicate that in a way that's going to get people on side and understand what's happening?
Yep.
So how do you be passionate about housing policy, for example? You can be passionate about housing, about homelessness, need to build housing, but when it gets to the nitty-gritty of it, that can be a harder thing. But that's where a speechwriter really comes out into their own. Can they make complex policy detail something that is clearer, vivid, that people can understand, that can win people over to support something that's perhaps less immediately dramatic than some of the big issues of our time, but nevertheless really substantive and important?
Yeah, so the biggest challenge for a speechwriter and where they can, flourish is where they can, turn a perhaps more mundane topic into something that people feel passionately about.
Exactly. And some of the greatest speeches have been those kinds of speeches. So less well remembered in post-war British history is one of the first women ministers, Barbara Castle. She was actually a really very good speaker, and she brought in things like the Open University, improved access to education, and gave some really powerful speeches on those kinds of issues, combining kind of policy detail and advocacy with much more rousing elements. And that's a real challenge for speech makers and for speech writers, but it's one of the key things that they have to do. That's one of the things we often forget, that sometimes a speech writer is sitting in a small corner of an office somewhere in Downing Street or the White House, and is having to quickly write a speech for communicating important, difficult information at a crunch moment, or having to convert all the things that the academics like me have done, all that policy detail, numbers, graphs, charts. How do they make that into something that's appealing? And that's a real core part of the speechwriter's art.
Fantastic, Alan. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Inspired by George's speech, we sent a team out to investigate food poverty here in Norwich.
In today's developed food economy, there are still a lot of people in the world for lack of food. In Norwich, there are a number of charities that operate at food banks, regular sourcing ingredients to cook hot meals for those in need.
I think it's very important for the future kind of well-being of generations that we make sure that everyone has something to eat, has somewhere to go to get food. 'Cause if we don't have that, then what else can you really do?
In today's developed food economy, there are still a lot of people in the world for lack of food. In Norwich, there are a number of charities that operate at food banks, regular sourcing ingredients to cook hot meals for those in need.
I think it's very important for the future kind of well-being of generations that we make sure that everyone has something to eat, has somewhere to go to get food. 'Cause if we don't have that, then what else can you really do? You can't look after someone unless they're well fed. It's one of the basic things.
We spoke to a food cycle volunteer about the current state of Norwich food poverty.
Food Cycle is a national charity, so there are hubs all across the country in different cities. I think we've got about 50 projects now around the country. Food Cycle itself has been going for about 12 years, and we've been in Norwich for 11 years. The project itself is run by volunteers. Nationally, there are paid staff, so we have an area manager that oversees the whole of East Anglia. There's finance managers and outreach managers that are paid, but the project here is run just by volunteers. So we have different shifts that volunteers sign up for. We only run on a Friday night. We have collection volunteers, so between 2 and 4 volunteers sign up for a shift, and they go out to supermarkets that we've already arranged with to collect surplus food that would otherwise get thrown away. So things that are past its best before date we can still use. So our volunteers go out and collect. We collect from places like Morrison's, Sainsbury's, Lidl, Aldi, Asda, the veg stalls on the market, the Chinese stall on the market. A couple of local bakeries and things as well, so quite a range of shops that we go to. We have time slots with them when we can go. Volunteers bring all the food back here for 4 o'clock, and at 4 o'clock the cooking team turn up.
The problem of food poverty is not just our personal problem. It belongs to everyone. We need to take it seriously and do our best to help those in need.
Being involved in the World Speech can have a great impact on your career. It can inspire people to find their voices and become passionate about issues they care about.
We spoke to former Norwich World Speech Day participant Callum Dineen about the impact World Speech has had on him and his career.
So I think speech is still the best way, the absolute best way to get a point across, to get an argument across. If you're passionate about something and you want to give a speech, recording a video to post on social media, that's good. That's really nice, which is what events like World Speech Day are great for, because all this is live streamed, all of it goes out on YouTube. And I really like having an unfiltered platform where you can get up, you can say what you want. And when you have confidence in what you're writing and the words that you're saying, because you've had a mentor and a tutor like Beth really help you through them, then that just makes you all the more confident on stage. So I think there's a lot of things from when you're young that you build up. It can be taught. I've gone on sort of public speaking courses, had lessons with some of the top people in the country actually have very graciously given their time to me over the years, which has been very nice and really helped me again. You pick up a lot of things along the way. Yeah, God, I mean, it's helped no end. I mean, the amount of brilliant things that have come out of not just the World Speech Day thing, but again, Beth Dirks really helped me with a lot of things in my life. I think the main thing that sort of led directly from World Speech, so on a broad level of the experiences, those kind of fed into each other. And then as an overall experience itself, what it taught me, what I was able to learn from it, and I'm still learning from it. It's not just, oh, it's been a while since I've written a speech, what was my writing style like in the past, but also looking back at that and critiquing myself with knowledge of what I know now, of speech writing now, and public speaking now, and thinking, right, how would I write that section differently? To think about how you write future speeches. I mean, even trying to rewrite something that you've already written, I think has really helped a lot. So I think those are the main two things. There's a lot that is really helped with as well. Again, just on a broad context around sort of the Future Leaders program that this was run through. There's been a lot of campaigns that I've run and campaigns that I'm still running now, or I've really benefited from events like World Speech Day, because public speaking gives you great confidence. It gives you great thinking on your feet when you're answering questions at the end. There's a lot of skills you learn through the process and through the different people that you're working with to take forward into other things that you do in your life. And I think that's a really important point is World Speech Day, you might feel like you're building up to the day, and you might feel like when you do the speech, you're like, oh, great, that's it, nailed it, perfect. But it leads on to bigger things, and you've learned things along the way that you can then go forward with and use in your life.
Really brilliant to see where some of our past World Speech Day performers have gone on to get to. So I'm joined by Will again, who has been busy working behind the scenes. You've probably been able to see him just behind us here, working on the social media and the website. So what have you been up to for this past hour and a half, Will?
Well, I've been sort of making use of lots of photos that our photographer has given us, so a few video clips as well. I've been posting those to Twitter. My fellow social media editor, Addy, has been posting those to Instagram, sort of making little tweaks because, you know, they're different platforms. Been commissioning different articles, like getting people to write things for the website, which is being run by Liv and Lauren. Yeah, it's been busy. Helped cut up some clips for one of the articles in particular about our students' favourite speeches. So my personal favourite was Tony Benn's from 1998 in House of Commons. Yeah, it's been all go.
Nice. And I can just see our producer just around the corner. Isaac, do you want to pop in? Let's just ask you a few questions. So
I've only got a minute.
This is Isaac here. He's been producing this whole programme behind the scenes. How's it gone for you? It's been a very busy day. I've been watching you, running around quite a lot.
Yeah, no, it's been great fun. Absolutely loved it. Been fun having everybody working really hard, and it felt like a really good day. It's a really good team effort, and well, come on guys, we've got half an hour to go, so we're not done yet.
We just heard Callum there saying how being part of World Speech Day has helped his career. For you, how has being part of World Speech Day but putting this programme on going to help in your career and what you want to do in the future?
Oh, well, yeah, definitely. It's helped me loads. I mean, you don't often get opportunities to produce 2 hours of live television. So having the opportunity to do that has been absolutely amazing, give me a really good insight and kind of show me, yeah, I can do this and I want to go and do that in my career. So yeah, it's been really useful actually. It's been really good fun, and yeah, not quite over yet. So.
Come on, I'm going to let you go back to the gallery because I know you've got a lot to be getting on with. Just quickly, Will, before we head back and watch the final two speeches, there's been some really, really insightful words today. Which has been the one that's really stood out to you? Because there's been lots on there. They've been talking to us, asking us to, help with end food poverty, learn about the menstrual cycle, looking at the problems in America. What would you say?
Oh, that's a really difficult question. I mean, the quality of speech has been really high today. If I had to pick my favourite overall, I would say Grace's speech about disharmony in the US. I felt that was particularly powerful. But I think my favourite quote, though, was something George said, where he spoke about how the earth is so bountiful that we have. It provides us with so much food and nutrition. And with modern farming technologies, if we really wanted to, we could feed all the billions of people on this earth to a very high standard, but we choose not to. And I thought that was a really provocative question that will really get our audience thinking.
It's really emotional words that we're hearing today. So we have only got 2 speeches left here at World Speech Day 2022 here at UEA. I'm going to hand back over to the studio now.
Thank you, Bron, Will and Isaac there. All of our lives have changed drastically over the last 2 years as a result of the COVID global pandemic.
One thing that may be a positive point is that we have spent less time shopping. Rampant consumerism can be a contributor to global warming and other social problems.
Our next speech by Tui Gayan explores the specific issue surrounding fast fashion.
Hi, my name is Tui, and I would like to share with you about my new harmony with our wardrobe after COVID pandemic. First, let's close our eyes and think of how much money we have saved over 2 years in lockdown for not shopping for new clothes. How did you feel about that? Less shopping in 2 years, no new jeans, new suit, no virtual pressures of following the latest trends, or no dress to impress. Instead, our focus has turned into improvisation to cope with the new normal, to attend online meeting. We have spent absolutely much more time to create new visual for the top part instead of the bottom part to attend Zoom meeting. We buy just one fewer really good item that we can feel happy to use in multiple occasions rather than random items, right? Or we improvise with what we already had with our wardrobe. So no doubt it has saved lots of money as well, right? So hands up if you feel that you have saved more money than 2018, 2019 for less shopping. What a relief, right? Now look further to the past, before the pandemic. Have you ever bought something that you thought you would wear, but then you never actually did wear it? And why did you buy it? It wastes money, right? Because it was on sale? Oh. So normally why do you check on sale clothing items? Because I could have it at cheaper price with same value, so why not? So you buy it. Why do we buy red and white color outfits for Christmas? Because it feels festive, so I buy it. Why do we buy the new outfit whenever we are invited to a new special occasion? Every wedding, every party, we buy a new piece of clothing. So the time we locked out gave me multiple chances to reflect why I buy what I bought when I look at my wardrobe. And it has changed me when I see myself survived after 2 years with 0 new clothes shopping. I saved more money. And I had time to reconsider my personal styles and find what pieces of clothing are essential for me, what works the best for me. Before, I realized that I used to be in the loop of shopping. Every morning I wake up, I opened my wardrobe, I got the feeling, oh, I have nothing to wear. I have to think about it, and I decided to shop. I used to follow lots of fashion influencers to update the trends, and I urged myself to make money so I could buy the thing they are advertised, to experience how trendy, how fashionable they are. But trend changes. It changed every season, not every year. So when I was in a loop, I shopped a lot and waste lots of money a lot. Now, for 2 years of not having them, I know that I don't actually need them as I thought I did. I realized that when I was in a loop of fashion consumption, the happiness I earned for the moment I managed to get that item of clothing was just temporary. So I hope you spend a few minutes to close your eye and think of that temporary happiness that the fashion consumption loop bring you in. If you were there like me, as I was before the pandemic, so please decide today and tomorrow, will you want to be in that loop or want to get out of that loop? So today I want to share you my journey to find the harmony with my wardrobe and my little pieces of advice of my finding harmony formula. It just includes 2 things. Accept what you have and be creative with them. Acceptance and gratitude. Accept what you have and feeling lucky that I still have things to mix and match. And throughout the journey, I found the distinctiveness between what I need and what I want. And a plus from that is that I have developed a very healthy relationship with my wallet. I feel harmony with wardrobe, and I see myself growing as a wiser buyer. And I feel even happier when I stop chasing trends, stop chasing the thrill of new experience, of possessions. Today I want to raise awareness of this new harmony with our wardrobe. I hope all of us feel the joy of getting out of the fashion consumption loop as I did. And I find happiness with every shopping decision. So before saying goodbye, I hope you will your new harmony with shopping. You found a good buy. Goodbye. And I'm Thủy.
Unfortunately, Tui has tested positive for coronavirus, and so this next interview by Bron has been pre-recorded on Zoom.
I just want to ask why you chose the topic of talking about fashion and fast fashion, and why this topic is so important to you.
Well, I would say that it was from my personal experience when I attended a youth conference in Vietnam back in 2018. I was like a young activist in like social development, so I attended a conference of youngsters in my country, Vietnam, and I met a founder of a project about fast fashion and sustainable fashions in Vietnam. And when I heard and I was inspired from her speech.
So
And,
how have you been speaking to your friends about this topic? How have you inspired your friends to make sensible decisions and changes with how they shop?
yeah, since I start my journey, I discuss with them a lot because some of them also into fashion style. We will discuss more of the solution, how to mix and match things, and in so as I say in 2020, I have a chance to be a member of global conference. We normally I will attend offline conference, but when I go online, I have a chance to talk with friends in different countries about how COVID changed their life and what we try to figure it out, the positive sides of COVID to cheer ourselves up and how it changed our life. And in fact, after the COVID pandemic, it is general saying that the earth is benefit from it.
Some of our reporters went out into Norwich to talk about fast fashion. Let's see what they found.
Heard about it.
Fast fashion, I've heard of it, but don't ask me what it is. You know, we often go beyond what we need. You only need so much. We don't need all the stuff. But it's pressure, social pressure.
People buy unnecessarily and then buy into fast fashion because it's cheap and everything, and then they look at designers like us and think our stuff is too expensive, but our stuff lasts longer than fast fashion. Probably once a month.
I'm a minimalist. I don't like shopping. I wear my clothes until they fall apart and I mend them because I'm very much into the environment.
I don't agree with fast fashion because it's kind of what destroying our industry. It's destroying individuality as well. People are just like a carbon copy of each other. People are wearing the same things nowadays.
It's a balance.
Alan, a lot of the time speeches are intended to garner support for perhaps a larger collective social change, right? But with things like fast fashion, you're trying to, through a speech, elicit individual change. What are the challenges that you face with trying to get individuals to change their behaviours compared to a collective?
Yeah, that's a really smart question. As you say, speeches are about changing something or getting people to do something or do something different.
Yeah.
But that might just be support a cause, cast a vote, support this candidate, support a particular bill, whatever it might be. And when you're asking people to make a personal change in their lives, you've got you've got some mountains to overcome as a speechwriter. People are perhaps regrettably more relaxed about generally saying they support a cause than making a change that might really impact their day-to-day lives, and as they might see it affect the quality of those day-to-day lives. If they think they're being asked to spend more money on clothes, if they're thinking they're being asked to lose their cars and their easy way to get to work because of climate change, that becomes a bit more difficult for them to support. So the first thing you have to do is address that in the speech, try and show how, if people support your cause and make these changes, in the end it might be better for them, as well as for the planet. There might be, as the woman was saying in the package there, she likes kind of repairing her clothes and developing an individual style. That might be a way in which you can get people to see it, something they want to do in their lives. But the key thing is to try and avoid, this can be really difficult on issues like this, making people feel bad about themselves. See, if your speech makes people feel guilty, then they're probably not going to be so keen on your speech. No one wants to be lectured at or hectored or made to feel bad. So how do you find a way around that as a speech maker? Well, maybe you do kind of want people to feel a little bit bad. Here's the thing that's a terrible thing that we're all colluding in supporting: exploitation of labour in textile factories in Bangladesh and despoilation of the environment. But if you make people just feel negative about themselves and awful, they're not going to have the energy or the enthusiasm to really commit to the cause and make the change that you're asking, and they might become hostile to you.
Well, how do you balance that sort of thing in terms of, like, you know, you don't want them to feel too bad that they kind of switch off from the message, but you need to address the issues, right? So how do you address the issues without kind of going over the line in a speech?
So it's partly about making people see the issue in a vivid way and feeling perhaps bad about that, about climate crises, about labour exploitation, wherever it might be, rather than feeling just bad about themselves. So earlier we saw how people were making connections between personal experiences and the big general issues, and trying to show the congruity between those, how what's going on in our individual lives affects these bigger issues, how these bigger issues affect our lives. So you can try and show people those connections, but not necessarily make them feel immediately awful about them. And you can put the emphasis on what they can do to make things better, as opposed to just affirming all the things that they're doing.
It's like when you
badly.
criticise someone and then you give them a compliment straight after.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think it's about the balance or the emphasis or the accent on what you're saying. If you take the first speech we had this afternoon, Grace's speech about racism and racial disharmony in America, it's very easy to give a speech that just makes people feel bad about the amount of racism, or makes people feel that they're being accused of supporting all the racist activity. Now, you might feel that they are, and you might want them to take responsibility, but at the same time, if all you leave them with is a message is that you think they're the core of all racism, you're probably going to lose them.
Sure.
But what Grace's speech did was build bridges and talk about how to align people, and she talked openly and frankly about her experience. She wasn't covering it over or pretending, but she was finding ways to open bridges and show examples of where people had overcome intense differences. So I think showing those examples, connecting those personal experiences in ways that bring people into the speech, make them part of the way you're thinking rather than pushing them out. That's a key part of good rhetoric and good persuasion.
Sure. Great insight there, Alan. Thank
Thank
you
you,
so much.
Alan. We've heard so many great speeches already today, but what is it that makes a truly good speech?
Our political correspondent, Isaac Cooper, sat down with Dame Rosie Winterton MP, Deputy Speaker of the House of Commons, for an exclusive interview on the art of political speech making and debate.
The speech maker being very clear about the message that they're trying to get over, not trying to make too many points, maybe 3 clear points that you want your audience to hear, not being too long, not being too short, and having enough pauses so that you can really emphasise the important points that you want to make, and so those listening to you know the real point of concern to you.
And at the moment, obviously, we've got the Ukraine crisis. How important is it for politicians to be factual, accurate, and in their speech making? And is it important for us as journalists to reflect those speeches in the same way?
Well, yes, it is absolutely. It's absolutely vital that we show that in our democracy, one of the things we value is being able to speak out, and we are speaking out on behalf of the people of Ukraine. And as for journalists, I mean, it's incredible the job they are doing at the moment. I was in the chair for a statement the other day where from all sides of the House they were praising the fact that, you know, we had journalists from this country who were going into incredibly dangerous situations, but were ensuring that we could hear the truth from them because they were there. And you compare that to, you know, the distortions that are being told, particularly I feel to the Russian people, you know, we treasure that. It's so much part of our democracy that our press are reporting in that way, and I pay a huge tribute to their bravery at the moment.
Thank you, Dame Rosie Winterton. Thank you so much for being here at UEA, and it's been a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Isaac.
Dame Rosie Winterton there, speaking about parliamentary speech. Alan, what are the differences between perhaps a more general speech and then parliamentary speeches?
Well, I think I'd answer that first of all by saying that in a way all speeches are different. All speeches are about a specific occasion, a specific moment. That's part of the magic of public speaking, is that it's happening in real time, it's happening live, it's for the audience that are there from the speaker who is speaking to them. And good speech adapts to the situations it finds itself in. It adapts to the topic. If it's, as we talked earlier today, is it a taboo topic? Yeah. Is it something people know a lot about, or something they know very little about? Is it something that's asking them to change something in their personal lives, or is it informing them about some kind of general issue? So all speeches have their differences. With general speeches, I suppose what you mean is speeches to kind of general public audiences. Yeah. So there, you don't necessarily know who's in the room. What audience are you speaking to? What kind of things do they know? What are they likely to feel? What are they going to find funny or interesting or moving? So that might mean that you have to make a speech that appeals in a very general sort of way to the kinds of things that people in your town, your city, your country, or wherever it might be, are likely to think and likely to feel. A parliamentary speech is going to be a little bit different because it's for MPs.
Well, how might a parliamentary speech be different in that aspect?
So, in parliamentary speeches, first of all, politicians have to adapt to the sometimes quite rigid conventions of how you speak in Parliament. There are things you can and can't say. You can't use certain words. Famously, in the British Parliament, you're not allowed to call someone a liar. You have to find a different way to talk about the variance between their words and the truth. Yeah. You're not allowed to be too aggressive. You can be, quite rightly in my view, called up by the speaker if you're too aggressive and too insulting. So you have to think about what's going to work in the environment of the House on that particular day. There's also likely to be quite a considerable time limit for a speech in Parliament. If it's in a debate, you may only have 3 minutes or so. You can be very, very quick, very, very efficient in getting your point across. And you've got to also think about, well, one of the challenges for a parliamentary speech today is you've got to try and think about the audience in the House, whose vote you're trying to win at that moment, as well as the TV audience at home, and that can be quite a difficult thing to manage. But I think in Parliament you've got a long tradition of parliamentary speeches, and an audience that is in some degree aware of that and can be willing to listen to you. So one of the things that you've got as an advantage in Parliament is that you can assume there's an audience there that's ready and willing to hear the debate, whereas outside of Parliament you might have to win people's interest in the first place.
Thank you, Alan. Cheers. Our final guest has had to overcome her own struggles with anxiety to feel confident in public speaking scenarios.
Our final speech of the day, as performed by Plum Bristow via her comedic character Dr. Cissy V. Williams, explores her own personal issues with anxiety.
So do I start reading now? Thank you. Now, I wonder if the very mention of public speaking brings a funny feeling in your tummy. I wonder if the idea of standing up in public makes your heart race. I wonder if it sets off in your mind a series of horrid thoughts predicting failure and certain disaster. Now, what if I told you I could get rid of those nerves? Never feel nervous public speaking again. Well, tough. That's not the aim here. The aim here is to get you to embrace those nerves and realize they are trying to help you, not stop you. I believe nerves are good. And you can be a good, nay, excellent public speaker, even if you are feeling frightfully squiffy. Dr. Cissy V. Williams here. Now, I am usually rather amazing character in stand-up comedy as written by the hugely talented Plum Bristow, spreading hilarity and joy in pubs and clubs in East Anglia. But today, on World Speech Day, I am here to talk to you on the subject of harmony and how, by embracing public speaking anxiety, it is possible to find a state of inner peace, along with the courage to dare to speak. Now, I can imagine what you're thinking. It's okay for you, for Cissy. You are so bally beautiful and talented that you've never been nervous to speak in public. And while the first part is most definitely true, the second part is not. My secret, despite my obvious beauty and talent, Even I still get the tummy wibbles when addressing a large audience. Public speaking nerves used to unnerve me through my body and through my mind. Have you ever stood there, waiting to stand up, speak, feeling sick, shaking, worrying? I've been clutching the paper, carefully prepared by my speechwriter, looking at the audience, looking into their faces and feeling time stand still. My body would be feeling utterly discombobulated. My heart would be pounding. My breathing would become fast and shallow, bringing about a feeling of panic and being out of control. And then I realised, by Jove, that's exactly how I feel just before setting off for a good gallop on a fine steed. Everything I am feeling in my body is merely preparing me for the challenge of controlling a large beast and the excitement of going jolly fast. I realised that my body is simply trying to prepare me for the challenge of public speaking. It feels like it's working against me, but as rarely, it's trying to give me the bluster and ballast to give my best performance. So, might I condescend to suggest that you thank your body for trying to help and realise that those feelings are your body trying to support you? My mind would become a veritable cacophony of heinous thoughts and fears that I was going to fail. Fears I would forget my words and people might laugh at me. Naturally, every comedian's worst nightmare. So I thought, how could I manage this? I imagined what I would do if an actual person was standing next to me saying these things. And I realised they would feel the sting of my whip. I would show them my whip and tell that rotter to jolly well trot on as far away from me as possible. Here, I will recognise it is not entirely possible to threaten inner voices away with a whip, however dastardly they may be. So I recommend simply acknowledging them and realising they are thoughts that can pass and they do not hold.
And that was our final speech here for UEA's coverage of World Speech Day 2022. I'm joined now by Plum. Plum, that was a really funny final speech to end on. Where did the inspiration come for putting on that speech for World Speech Day?
I just wanted to do something a little bit fun. I like an excuse to be sissy. And also, I'm just about to start teaching confidence in public speaking at the UEA. So I kind of wanted to showcase that a little bit as well. So it kind of felt like an excuse to showcase several things at once.
Yeah, and lots of people will be inspired now watching all of those speeches, and particularly yours, to go out and try public speaking. Sure. What are your top tips? What's your best advice to people who will be going out there and doing it for the first time?
I think Brené Brown is one of the most inspiring people I know. And her idea is that it's okay to be nervous, it's okay to feel vulnerable. When you have your critics, you have your voices that say you're not good enough, invite them to listen and just accept they're there, but just kind of, they're like little kids. Don't worry about them, you know.
So it's not just public speaking you do, it's not speech making. You're involved in comedy. So just tell us a bit about that. How did you get into it and how's that helped you with your confidence?
Sure, it started off actually through public speaking. So it started off by doing a speaking course with Beth, and that kind of ended up me doing a TEDx, which went wrong. When it went wrong, I cracked a joke, the audience laughed. I thought, oh, blimey, I want more of this. And I kind of made some contacts with some comedy networks around Norwich and just started doing it.
So what kind of things have you done around Norwich further afield with your characters? It was Sissy V. Williams,
yes,
am I correct?
Sissy V. Williams. Well, she's been as far as Peterborough.
She's got miles.
She has. She's been out of Norfolk. It's really scary.
So what kind of thing you've got coming up? What do you have?
I'm actually doing a show on Wednesday So I'm going to be at the last pub standing on Wednesday with Humour Comedy. So I'm going to be with my hat and my coat, my whip, and I'm going to be Sissy.
Would you say to people who are just trying to start out with speaking again, you said earlier putting on the jacket and the costume really helped. Would you use that as a tip?
Oh, yeah. I mean, one of the things that's really helped is Sissy, the character of Sissy, which normally means weak, but not in this case. She's a narcissist. She assumes everyone loves her. She assumes her right. And actually, being that has given me almost a fake it till you make it thing. So, yeah, I love it.
I think that is a top tip. It's fake it till you make it and you'll get the public confidence. So thank you very much for that one. So we're going to hand back over to the studio now, who's just going to do a final roundup. Back to you in the studio.
That rounds up Norwich's broadcast of World Speech Day 2022. We want to say a massive thank you to all of our speakers this afternoon and a big thank you to the entire team behind the scenes. And to Alan, thank you. Any final comments on any of the speeches that you heard today?
Well, just to thank you for having me along, giving me the chance to see and hear and think about all of these fantastic speeches. We've heard such an incredible variety of topics, from people's personal experiences, their relationship to phones and anxiety, to the biggest of political topics, climate change, poverty, racism and so forth. I think that's just a mark of the kind of the not just the range and breadth of interests of the people who've given our speeches, but also of the things that speech can be about and what speech can do. And I think that's very much in tune with not just World Speech Day's own goals of talking about harmony, but with the very idea of speech and public speaking itself. It's an opportunity for people to articulate and talk about the things that matter to them, to audiences, for us to get to know them, but also think and learn and feel differently about something.
Yeah. Cheers, Alan. Thank you.
Very
Bron, do you have any final thoughts from anyone in the newsroom?
Okay. If I ask you a question, you may need to step forward, just because this went.
Okay, I'll duck.
Oh, hello. So we have got all of the speakers here who've made some wonderful speeches today. How have you all found it? How have you found it, Plum?
It's been good fun.
Yeah, and how have you found it? What's your favourite bit of the day?
It's been really fun. This has been exciting, hanging out in the back as well, and then, just coming on screen and doing it.
So for a lot of you, it's been the first time you've done any kind of public speaking. What advice would you give to next year to help them make their speeches, write their speeches, and ultimately build up the confidence to perform it? Shall I come to you, Esmat?
It was quite a great experience. It was fun. I think it's a great opportunity to raise our voice, to spread, and also to share our thoughts.
And anyone else got? What's your advice, Grace? What do you say to everyone?
If you have any ideas, start writing it down now. Anything that's emotional to you, that's thought-provoking to you, just write it down now. And when the opportunity comes to share, you'll have substance. Because I had these thoughts a long time, but I didn't do anything with them. So this is the perfect chance to get all those things out into the world.
And harmony has been the theme of this year, but it's also all about unexpected voices coming through, and that will make the real change in society. What have you got to say on that? What is the importance of unexpected voices in public speaking to you? George, I'll come to you.
Well, I think everyone's got something they're incredibly passionate about, be it the politician or someone that you would, as you say, not expect at all. And if that thing is important enough to you, a speech will come naturally. You can project yourself, you can give fantastic awareness to whatever the cause is, but don't feel afraid to do it. Once you're passionate enough about something, it will come through naturally. So.
Yeah, and Plum, unexpected voices, what does that mean to you?
Diversity, getting people of all ages and heights to come and speak.
Love it. Thank you very much for all those wonderful speeches today. And we can take away so many messages from all of the different themes that we've heard from today. So remember what they have said to you and take that forward. And if you want to get involved in public speaking, go out there and do it. Thank you very much for being here today. I'll hand back over to the studio.
Natalia, what were your thoughts about World Speech Day this year, and were there any speeches that stood out to you as your favourite, maybe?
I think all of them were amazing. Maybe I would say that Smat's speech on climate crisis was very good.
Yeah, I really liked Grace's speech as well on racial disharmony, but honestly, I liked all of them. I thought they were all really captivating and really interesting as well.
What about you, Alan? What was your favourite speech?
It's unfair to make me pick favourites, and they were all such different speeches. And I definitely think Grace's had a kind of powerful message put very powerfully, but I think it was also impressive how our minds were brought open to mobile phones and how they dominate us, to fast fashion, how we should think about what we're wearing. So all of them have given me many things to think about.
Great,
Thank you very much. That's all from us in Norwich. We hope you all have a great World Speech Day.
Thank you.
Goodbye for
Goodbye.
now.